Good morning, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting a critical analysis of Spider-Man. However, rather than looking at his powers, I'll be analyzing his decision-making process through the lens of our Critical 100 course syllabus. We'll be looking at how Peter Parker applies concepts like models, functions, and decision trees to survive in a chaotic world. In both weeks 1 and 2, we discussed order, disorder, and breaking the world into parts. Spider-Man represents the ultimate struggle against disorder. His life is chaos, but his moral code brings order. We also view him as a complex system made of conflicting parts: the high school student, the nephew, the vigilante. His success depends on how well these parts interact. And in week 3, we talked about thinking with models. Peter Parker is a master modular. His spider sense is essentially an intuitive, high-speed predictive model that warns him of danger. Furthermore, he builds psychological models of his enemies. He knows he can't outpunch the rhino, so he models the rhino's physics, momentum, and inertia to trick him into running into walls and damaging himself rather than having to fight the rhino himself. And we learned about thinking of code and functions in week 4 and 5. We can view Spider-Man's heroism as a function. The input is a crime and the output is justice. The crucial part of Peter's code is I deleted the ignore button after Uncle Ben died because Peter failed to act. His internal programming changed so that every input of danger must result in an output of function. Week 6 asked, what is truth? In Spider-Man's world, truth is complicated. There is an objective truth that he saves lives, but there's also the subjective truth, pushed by J. Jonah Jameson. Jameson exhibits confirmation bias, only printing truths that fit his narrative that Spider-Man is a criminal. This forces Peter to fight a war not against villains, but against public perception, against the truth. Analogy from week 7 is how we transfer knowledge from one area to another. This is Peter's greatest weapon. He takes what he learns in physics classes and applies it to fighting supervillains. If he's fighting an electric villain, he uses the analogy of a circuit board to defeat him. He doesn't just punch, he outthinks them using comparative reasoning. For example, he takes a battery and overloads it and applies that analogy to fighting Electro, treating Electro as a big battery. If you can overload Electro, you can defeat Electro. In week 9, we just studied decision trees. A superhero fight is essentially a high-speed decision tree. Every move opens new branches. The most famous example is when the Green Goblin drops Mary Jane and a cable car of children. Peter has to navigate a split-second decision tree to figure out the only path that results in saving both. Usually he finds a third branch that the villain didn't see. This is very similar to the trolley problem. Either save the love of his life or a bus full of children. Of course, Spider-Man figures out a way to save both of them, but it's a classic decision tree. Week 11 covered shapes of uncertainty. Spider-Man's life follows a probability distribution. Most days are normal, stopping a car thief, but he lives in a world of black swans, highly improbable, catastrophic events like an alien invasion. Being a hero means managing this uncertainty. He has to be ready for the average day, but adaptable enough for the extreme outliers. Hence the bell curve I made here. The middle and the mean is the muggers, his everyday average, always taking out muggers. But the extreme edge is a catastrophic alien invader like Thanos, who is very unlikely but has a much higher chance of damage towards himself and Earth. And finally, in week 12, we looked at organizing information in data frames. To survive, Peter mentally organizes data on his rogues gallery. If he views enemies as a data set, he has columns for their powers, columns for their weaknesses, and columns for their motivations. By structuring this information, he can quickly query his memory to find the right tactic for the right villain. For example, in Spider-Man No Way Home, the picture seen here, Peter uses geometry in the magic dimension to defeat Doctor Strange in his own world, in his own dimension. Um, he took the world around him and used it against him, using his own strengths, geometry. To conclude, Spider-Man is a perfect pop culture example of a critical thinker. He doesn't just react, he analyzes. He uses the tools we learned in this class, logic, probability, models, and data organization, to solve problems that brute force can't fix. He teaches us that while we might not have web shooters, we all have the power of critical thought. Thank you for listening.